Good morning all, and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. First of all, are there any apologies? None been notified. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. Turning to item 3, the minute of the Audit Committee held on the 12th of April. That's on pages 3 to 11. Happy that that's correct representation of the meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. Does anybody have any matters arising or anything they wish to raise from the minutes? Turning to the first of two papers today, item 4 is the Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report for 2020-2021, and that will be Isabel, Isabel Wright, who will be presenting that. Isabel, thank you.
Thank you very much. Morning. So yes, this report is the 2021 Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report. The purpose of the report is to summarise the work Internal Audit have undertaken over the course of the last year and to provide an overall opinion on the Council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control based on that work. The report also comments on our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As you can see from section 2, I would ask the Audit Committee to note that sufficient internal audit work was undertaken to support a balanced assurance, and that internal audit can provide substantial assurance on arrangements for risk management, governance and control. In addition, I can report that the internal audit met or exceeded key performance indicators. Section 3 of the report explains that the internal audit plan was subject to change. Paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6 explain the plan set out 20 assignment areas with 21 reviews that were planned. One of the planned reviews is ongoing within the Falkirk Integration Joint Board assignment area. The impact of COVID-19 resulted in 8 reviews that weren't conducted. Only 3 of those have not been carried forward into the 21-22 plan. Instead of those 8, 6 other reviews have been completed, with a 7th ongoing as we speak. A summary of the work completed and not completed is set out at Appendix 2. The scope of and the findings arising from each finalised assignment is set out at Appendix 3. I'd like to draw your attention in Appendix 3 to specifically the follow-up of internal audit recommendations. Work on recommendations was picked up by the team in April and May, with action agreed by to be taken by services to ensure that no recommendations were outstanding beyond their agreed date. At paragraph 3.8, you will see internal audit performance against the 3 key performance indicators. Actual performance exceeded target for all 3 indicators, although the impact of COVID-19 meant that internal audit completion was below 100%. Section 4 of the report comments on compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. These set out the principles and practices that we must comply with, and every year we're required to undertake a self-assessment against the standards. This has given reassurance that we operate in line with those standards. It was undertaken by internal audit during February of this year. There's also a 5-year external assessment, which the section last underwent during 2018, and we were found to be compliant. I think that's all I'm going to say on that. Thank you. Happy to try and answer any questions.
Thanks, Isabel. Clearly, COVID has had a substantial impact on the delivery of the internal audit plans, which have, as you say, have been adjusted accordingly, making sure we get our priorities right. I'm going to open it up to the committee now. Any questions? I think Cecil, maybe come to you first.
Thank you, convener. I think it's been acknowledged that obviously that the last sort of 18 months have been very unusual, and as a result, there's been areas of work that audit have had to take on that's displaced others, and quite rightly too, because of the situation we're in. So I just want to ask a couple of questions around whether or not we're going to go back to those areas that were first in the audit plan, and relook at them. Also, the fact that we have obviously our timescales have slipped again for good reason, and being able to get back up to meeting our performance indicators going forward. Are we going to be able to do that? Is there enough resource to be able to do that? And recognising finally that we are still in a very fluid and unstable period, is there capacity, if necessary, for any additional work to be taken on within the audit plan during the year if situations arise? Thank you, convener.
The audit areas that weren't undertaken, 5 of them are actually in this year's plan. There were 3 that weren't carried forward in their form that they are in last year. So one of them was Office 365, and we did kind of miss the boat on that one because we had other work to do, and in all honesty, the COVID-19 work was more of a priority at that time, and what we were looking at in Office 365 was around the project side of it, and then therefore going into the implementation. So yeah, we did miss the boat on that, but there were other priorities at that point, and there weren't apparent issues where it would have made it a high enough risk to transfer over. So yeah, that one's gone. The other 2 are around contract management that weren't completed, and they are actually more or less being covered in the housing contract monitoring audit that's being undertaken this year. So it will look at contract management and it will look at the monitoring side. So we're more or less covering those 2 off as well. In terms of the PIs and the resource, you'll see over the previous years, we generally do okay on the PIs. We work really hard as a team to try and meet the PIs, and we're well aware of what they are and the focus required to keep the standards up. I don't think there's a resourcing issue as such. I think it is very much based on flexibility throughout the year, depending on what actually happens during the year in terms of where we need to move the resource around and try and prioritise the work to where it's really needed. So going forward, yes, we know there's no crystal ball. We don't know how that's going to look. But I think there is the capacity there to do it. And it is always about prioritising highest risk areas and also trying to fit in additional work where required. And we always will try to do that. But yeah, you're right. It's a bit of a juggling act.
Thanks, Isabel.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Nimmo? No. Okay. I have a number of the areas I was wanting to look at. Page 21 in the appendices in relation to creditors and paying duplicate invoices to the tune of 98,000. Can I ask, first of all, is this across the board, or is there any particular area where we've identified a problem with duplicate invoice payments?
Can I just add, before I answer your question, is it okay just to say we've actually done the January to March duplicates now since the report was written, and the total figure went up to 115,000, which are in the process of being recovered. The duplicates is good work to do from a continuous auditing point of view. It keeps a bit of a focus there. There's no one area that's a specific problem or a specific supplier, if you like. And I think one thing to probably highlight here is that over the years that we've done this and looked at it every quarter, it averages out at something like 0.02% of the total amount of payments that are going through the system. So, you know, it's a very low figure in terms of the value of the payments and the number of the payments, but it is a good piece of work because it's bringing money back in that shouldn't have gone out in the first place.
Thanks, Isabel. Just in terms of recovery of that, I mean, how confident are we that 115,000 will come back in?
Yeah, no.
Whether you can answer that or whether it's Brian.
I can tell you from experience in terms of what comes back in, and we keep a handle on it. We keep, and it's the business support lead that the information goes to, and various other people who then go back and look, and yeah, we keep a track of what comes back and the work that's done to do that. And sometimes it's not about money being sent back right away. It may be that we owe money to that supplier for something else, so it's maybe just straight deducted off the next payment. So it's very dependent on individual payments. But yeah, there's not an issue in generally getting it back because we can claw it back off the next payment.
Okay, I see a hand up from Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just a question on page 26. That's concerning the waste services monitoring.
Yeah.
It's a situation where, as you know, we have external contractors that collect various bits of waste. It would appear that we're reliant on occasions on their weighbridge as to what they've picked up. I'm not implying that they're necessarily dishonest themselves, but do we not have our own weighbridge that can do that checking?
This is maybe, I can come in right away on that, but it's maybe Douglas that will be able to give more detail there. So yes, the issue at the time was around the weighbridge. Our weighbridge wasn't big enough, I think, to deal with the volume and the scale of what was going over it. So we were relying on contractors to tell us. Since then, a new weighbridge has been installed. I think it was installed in April, so that should negate the problems that we've found.
Fine.
Douglas, anything to add to that, Douglas, at all?
Isabel's correct, Convener. So that work was undertaken. It was a constraint, and we had to find budget in order to implement those improvements ourselves, which has been done. And we've also picked up on the other actions that arose from that audit in relation to the requirement to ensure that we receive written quotes rather than follow-up emails, that kind of thing, and also that the contract variations that were required for the use of additional vehicles with FCC. FCC is the contractor that we use for the food waste disposal contract, and we had to verify the number of vehicles, additional vehicles that they required in order to deliver that contract, and that work's been done.
Thanks, Douglas. You kind of answered the couple of questions, 2 out of the questions that I was going to ask. The inadequate arrangements for overall contract spend and the arrangements for invoices. But looking at the top paragraph on page 26, there's limited assurance in terms of the arrangements for billing contract suppliers for income due to the council. Why have we got limited assurance there? I don't know, Douglas, whether you can
I
answer
think it
that
is.
one.
It's back to that point. The rest of it we could provide substantial assurance on in terms of the remit items, but it wouldn't have been right to provide an overall substantial assurance when there were issues with the weighbridge. So the limited assurance, and then obviously on the other side to that is it wouldn't have been fair to provide a limited assurance when everything else was adequate and there weren't the same weaknesses. So the limited is mainly around the weighbridge issue, which obviously now has been dealt with.
Thanks, Isabel. I mean, it's clearly that's the issue of income. I mean, I think this is really quite important that we tighten up here, because we've just had a statement of the financial outturn for the year ended 2021, and development services are overspent on their budget and largely in terms of waste services. So I think crucially, there are a number of things that need to be tightened up. I don't know whether we get a report back that things have been improved in that area.
I would say, Convener, the work has been done to attend to the recommendations coming from the audit. So these are measures that are intact now. The pressures on overspend have arisen from COVID-related costs. This is about the requirement for the additional vehicles and the additional service demand that has arisen. So the demand for bulky goods uplifts, the demands at the recycling centres have been significant, and that has put cost pressures against that service. That's why there is the level of expenditure that's taken place. We would hope that things will start to settle, obviously with the restrictions easing. Speaking to Carol, we had our management meeting this morning, and we are expecting guidance on the requirements for additional vehicles for social distancing to be amended. We expect some guidance later this week, and we are hopeful that as a consequence we can step down the additional hire vehicles and so on we've had to establish in order to maintain the service. In normal course, the waste service, is contained within its budget and does meet the performance measures that we're expected to achieve. COVID has been exceptional in the pressures it's introduced.
Thanks, Douglas. Pat, I see you. There's a hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or is it your another question?
No, it's alive at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So to sum up, if Isabel were to carry out her audit today, would the assurance level change?
Pardon?
If you were to audit waste management services today, would your assurance still would be any substantial elements, you think?
Yeah, if we were going to review today, what we would be doing, we would be looking at the what was coming out with the new weighbridge being in place. So we would be checking. We'd probably take a sample and make sure that we were looking at the readings and making sure that's what we were paying for. So yeah, if everything was in place, that it would hopefully be going in that direction.
If I may ask a further question, is there a weighbridge available to the public at a cost, or to any other contractor? Would we charge anyone else for using it? I think we used to a long time ago.
Through you, Convener, I'm not aware of us doing that, but it's certainly a question I can ask Carol Buller as the head of service.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
I may ask just another couple of points just on the Pocket Pension Fund and the operational cash management arrangements. Perhaps it's the exceeding the limit of 8 million. What's to be done about that? Perhaps Brian's the one to ask on that one. It's on page 24.
Thank you, convener, and good morning. This issue applied generally to our treasury operation, not just the pension fund, equally applied to the council's core treasury activity, and indeed the pension fund tends to replicate the council's treasury operating environment and the banks, etc., that we lend to. And what was happening was that, just given the state of the market, we were finding it very difficult to place our funds on the market, and that in part was reflective of our strong cash position, which constantly changes. Sometimes you're borrowing in the market, sometimes you're lending, but during this phase we were very cash rich, and given the set of thresholds that were applying at the time and the number of approved institutions we would lend to, and we're very, very careful who we lend to. We take a very risk averse and prudent stance on that. So it's only the financial institutions with the very strongest credit ratings that we would lend to. So we did two things to address that particular situation. One was we slightly extended the range of institutions that we would lend to, and secondly, we increased the threshold from 8 million to 10 million, and the combination of those two has allowed us to manage the situation. As I say, it was a particular scenario that prevailed, and I suspect it's not one that will extend greatly into the future. Things are already showing signs of easing back. So it was a course of action that we took at that particular time to address a particular problem. Hopefully that reasonably explains it.
Yes, it does. Thanks, Brian. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just being prompted here that you mentioned that you did raise the limit. Is there a proposal that we actually formally raise that limit from 8 to 10 and keep it there? I know that internal audit have raised that question, I think. Is that correct, Isabel?
Convener, if I can maybe just come in, just from my perspective, from the operational side, we reported the scenario I've outlined and the remedial action in the Treasury report that goes to the executive. So the sanction and notification of that course of action was dealt with through that channel, convener.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. Alan, yep.
Yep, thanks, convener. Just a quick point, and it's going back to your first question, really, regarding the issue of duplicate payments. There's obviously something wrong with the system if it's allowing for duplicate payments. There could be significant duplicate payments, and I'm just wondering what actions, or is there software available that we could use to stop this? Because we're obviously paying out money that we don't have to, and we're not getting it back straight away. I would imagine some of the companies that have to refund the money, they'll take their time in refunding us. So is there any way we can mitigate this to try and get rid of the problem? Thanks, convener.
Thanks. Maybe one for Brian again, is it? you be able to comment on that?
I'm happy to try and pick that up.
Sure.
Convener. So,
Sure.
so there's a number of controls in place along the lines that Councillor Nimmo has spoken about to try and avoid a situation of duplicate payments being made. I think it's worthwhile making the point that the number of duplicate payments being made is small and the value is small. What was it, 0.02%? I think that Isabel quoted. So, you know, no set of system controls can be perfect, but I think we've got to a stage where the number of duplicate payments are small and the values are small, and we'll keep on working to try and drive down these numbers, but members should take some assurance from the fact that the number of payments is small and the value is small.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Any further questions on that? So we are happy to accept that report. And the recommendations at 2.1. We're all happy to agree to accept that? We are agreed. Okay, moving to the final item on the agenda, which is the review of whistleblowing and corporate fraud investigation procedures. And Mr. Ritchie will take us through that. Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Convener. So members received a progress report in April on our review of whistleblowing and corporate fraud investigation procedures, and today's report provides members with a progress update on the work involved in these matters. Just to remind members, the backdrop to this work is a number of recommendations that were made by EY in their annual report considered by Council in February of this year. We said in April that when we were reviewing how we undertook these matters, we would look at best practice from across other councils in Scotland and also lean on EY to pick up on best practice that they'd identified from their area of activities. In section 4.2 of the report, we talk about the important lessons that have been learned from work that we've done internally, but also work that we've done with EY, which will improve our corporate fraud procedures as we move forward. In April, we set out the number of documents that needed to be reviewed and updated. That was a substantial number of documents. And in section 4.3 of the report, we set out the fact that once we get into the guts of doing that work, it's turned out to be a bit more complex than we originally thought, just with the interaction that there is between the various documents referred to. The table in section 4.5 of the report sets out the governance arrangements on how each of the policies and strategies will be approved. So some of the policies will be considered first by the corporate partnership forum. That's the discussions that we have with the trade unions, and then go to the executive. Some will require to come to council. We're expecting all of this work to be completed post the recess. The next section of the report deals with reporting of fraud matters to members, and start off by reminding committee that, like internal audit reports, the reporting of fraud should be about providing members with assurance on how we're dealing with corporate fraud allegations. Reporting needs to balance three things: One, the protection of public monies. Secondly, the rights of employees. And third, the protection of whistleblowers. So taking these factors into consideration, we are proposing to report twice yearly to committee on matters relating to fraud, and we're proposing that we do that along the lines set out in the appendix to this report, and the detail appearing in that appendix is drawn from the best practice that I referred to earlier on. I think this will be an evolving matter for us. So what we have now is not necessarily, I think, what we're going to have always going forward, but hopefully it's a useful start for us. As well as reporting twice yearly formally to this committee where there's a particularly sensitive case or information becomes available in the public domain, then the chair of the audit committee and the group leaders would receive separate briefings at that time, and members will know from previous experience that that has worked well. I don't plan to go into the detail of what is set out in the appendix to the report, but you'll see that it's been a busy year for the corporate fraud team. They have been involved along with colleagues in revenues and Pete Reid's business team in considering 4,500 grants with a value of £33 million. We've received positive feedback that we built into the grant consideration process a corporate fraud input, so many applications didn't get very far because we had a corporate fraud input at the front end of the process. The report asks members for feedback on the suggested framework that's set out in section 4.6 of the report. So, convener, that seems an appropriate time to remind members that the recommendations are set out in section 2 of the report. We're looking for feedback from committee to the framework that we've set out in paragraph 4.6 of the report, and between Isabel and myself, we'll be happy to answer questions that members have this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Before I open it out to the committee, just a simple question. How many staff have we got in the corporate fraud team?
There are 2 members of staff who are directly involved in corporate fraud, and then there's some of Isabel's time, quite a lot of Isabel's time can be allocated to corporate fraud as well. So it's 2 and a flexible resource.
And the line management arrangements are?
So we've got a corporate fraud officer, a senior reporting into Isabel. Isabel reports to Brian. Brian reports to me. I report to Kenneth.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open it out. I'll maybe go to the leader first, Cecil, if you've got some comments.
Thank you, convener. And I think there's a lot of credit has to go to such a small team and what they actually produce at the other end, and particularly over recent times with some of these fraud allegations coming to the fore and being very public. It makes it difficult as well and challenging to be able to carry out some of those investigations sensitively. We also have had such a huge pressures on us around the grants process as well, and the fact that the process we were asked to truncate it therefore introduces, from the point of view of audit, some risks but to have managed to deal with that is a real positive, and actually still ensure that we got the grants out to the right people and got them out legitimately. So I think there's a huge credit to a huge teamwork there across our revenue benefits, corporate fraud, and indeed our economic development, and bringing all of that together. And I'm aware that part of the reason, particularly around the whistleblowing and the corporate fraud, was as a result of things being very public, and it's right that we do that, and as members we do really need to have assurance. And I think that there's been a bit of a trawl around all the other local authorities to look at best practice and to make sure that we have as robust a process as possible. But we are looked to have feedback to the officers around how we take things forward. And I think that the suggestions put forward by Stuart are probably about the right level. We need to recognise that this is a sensitive issue, and while we as elected members need to have a certain element of information around assurance, we need to ensure that the integrity of the council and the sensitivity of the matters, as well as the protecting those that are involved, whether that be as allegations or investigations. So I think by having a way of being able to report into the committee in a sanitised way, but also making group leaders aware of the issues, and particularly where it is sensitive. So I would certainly agree with that, and that gives us assurance that public money is not being misused, but doesn't give us specifics. Reporting twice yearly, I would like to think that that would be reasonable, and I would like to think we don't have huge numbers of fraud allegations to look at. So I think that probably is reasonable and proportionate. And but I would think that it might be helpful in order to give the committee assurance if we had some kind of benchmark measure or performance indicator that would allow us to have an understanding of where we sit, and to how well we're performing, particularly around identifying fraud and dealing with it. And also, I think certainly to be able to quantify the reasons for doing this by way of the benefits to us as an organisation, but also the savings that might actually come from that. So that would be my thoughts around some feedback that I think the committee could use and help to take some assurance from going forward. But I think there's been a huge amount of work done and lessons learned from the process that we now need to just put into practice going forward. And thanks very much, convener.
Thanks for that, Cecil. Any comment at that stage? I don't see Councillor Namo got his hand up there. Alan?
Thanks, Nigel. I've got 2 or 3 points here just to make. The first one's in relation to 4.6 on page 39. You'll note from the table that's provided there that some prepayment checks, in some cases most of them are being undertaken, and in others all of them are being done. Now it goes back to my previous point about duplicate payments as well. I'm a bit concerned, obviously, that we're not checking them all in all these cases to make sure that they're all correct. I'm just wondering if I can maybe get a response to that, and then I'll go into my next point.
Okay. Stuart, to you.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether that's one that Isabel could maybe pick up.
Okay. Isabel? I think you're muted. Sorry, can't hear you, Isabel.
I think he's having difficulty unmuting.
All right. Okay, we'll go on to your next question and we'll see if we can get Isabel back to us, Alan.
Okay, can go back to that one then.
Yeah.
The next question is in relation to the whistleblowing investigations on page 41. There's details there. Now, I know the leader has already set out the possibility for future reporting to the committee in relation to this, but we still have 5 cases investigated and closed. I'm just wondering if we could get the outcome of these 5 cases. And there's also the 3 ongoing cases. I'm not looking to try and compromise the ongoing investigations, but it would be good to know maybe some of the details, if possible, as to what's involved in these.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up, convener. So in relation to the 5 cases that have been closed, there was no fraudulent activity identified, and maybe one of the things that I said earlier on, that this is going to be a growing and developing report, and maybe what we do as we develop is try and find a way of setting out for members what has happened as a result of the investigations that have been carried out, what was the kind of number of recommendations, something along these lines that would help members get a better understanding of what's come out of these allegations. So that's something that we can look to try and develop for the next time we report. As far as the 3 allegations that are currently ongoing, these will be in relation to areas that are not unusual for allegations to be made over. So misuse of materials, for example, misuse of materials, inappropriate use of time for a personal nature, things of that nature.
Okay, thanks for that, Stuart. My final points in relation to the table at 5.5, requests from Police Scotland. Now, there's 490, which seems a really high figure. I'm just wondering if there's any other information to back this figure up. Are we making referrals of potential fraud from members of the public to the police? Is that part of the issue here? I'm just curious as to why the figure's so high. And do we charge the police for the service?
That's okay.
Yeah, I'll try and pick as much up of that as I can, convener. So the numbers are consistent with what they've been in previous years. So the numbers are not abnormal, and I wondered myself whether there might have been a change in the numbers in the last 12 months or so. So I can give members assurance that the numbers have not changed. No, this is the police asking us for information about our employees. It's not about referrals that we are making to the police for corporate fraud activity. As far as your last question is concerned about do we charge the police for this information, my understanding is no, but Isabel, if she can't speak, maybe even just nod her head or shake her head.
I'm obviously conscious, Stuart, that there's a charge involved for the council to provide this information.
Yeah.
So it might be worthwhile thinking about maybe passing that charge on.
I think we've got Isabel back on sound now, so maybe, I don't know whether you've got anything further to say there, and reverting back to the Alan's first question, Councillor Nimmell's first question.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I couldn't get it off mute. we don't charge for it, and I don't really see a way that we could charge for that. It's about working together and it collaboratively. Yeah, right. Though there is a charge for that, and all of the checks and searches that we do for all of the different organisations, we obviously pay for that service to do that. Stuart's completely right in what he says. It's the police that come to us almost on a daily basis, and it's information under the GDPR. It's for the prevention and detection of crime, and it could be around they want information on tenants and what addresses they're at. It could be children who are living in the property that they want to know about. They may want to know if the property is a private let or if it's a council one. It's obviously all to do with intelligence for them, and it is a very useful service, I think, borne out by the very fact that they have officers who get in touch almost on a daily basis with the council for that level of information.
Okay, I'm happy to leave it at that at the moment, convener. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Any other member have any questions? I see no. Oh, right. Councillor Reid, see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, convener. It's simply to agree with the leader's response to the report in terms of what members should know and should not know. I think we have to look out for the more prudent amongst us, basically sticking in their noses where they shouldn't be, to be honest. So I think the approach there is quite balanced on not letting members know the specifics or individuals and simply reporting the matter quite surely. Otherwise, there are dangers concerned.
Yeah.
I think too, I must confess to misreading the report that I read about on 2.3 that we had sessions raising staff awareness of counterfeit goods at 3 separate sites. But I realised it was the partnership events that were held at the 3 separate sites, not the counterfeit goods, and just in case somebody misreads that in the future. Could I ask a question about the single person discount? That's an area where it's a very difficult one to control. Could someone remind me of when the single person's discount attains? How long does that third person have to be, second person have to be in the house before the discount applies or is taken away, sorry? Because you do have people who are transient, maybe require accommodation for a couple of months with their parent. And how can we possibly trace that thing? Are all these matters reported to us? How do we find out?
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be very helpful. I'm not entirely sure of the answer to your question, other than the fact that single person discount is around whether there's only the one person over 18 as an adult living in the home. So that's why they get the discount. So the matches are around different systems, and it flags where there's maybe it's the different systems are saying that there's more than one person over 18 living in the house. So where we've got over 2,000 matches, that's where it's saying that you maybe want to have a look at that, because there's more than one person, and we're actually giving a discount to council tax for that particular person where there may be others living there. So I know that's not really answering your question, but that's what goes on around it.
Your answer is helpful, that the information can be obtained from other council sources as well as other government sources. So yeah. I just think it might be, I just think this may be fairly widespread and not necessarily deliberate. The person forgets to do it. You know. It's an interesting field. I think that was it, convener. These are all the questions.
Thanks, Pat. Are there any other questions at this time? No further hands. So we're happy to agree the recommendation that we note that the progress with the fraud review, and in terms of future updating of this committee, we seem to be happy with a twice yearly report along the lines that Cecil, in fact, suggested that it be sensitive, and perhaps added to that the suggestion that some performance indicators be included in that report, so that we've got something to benchmark against to see that we're actually doing the job. Are we happy with that?
Agreed.
Well, that brings the meeting to a close. I thank you all for attending and for your contribution. And sun's coming out, so it might be a nice day for us for a change.
Thanks,
So
Convener.
thank you again, and we'll see you. Thank you.